Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Hi, thank you very much for joining me today. My name is Rebecca Naylor, and I'm a health coach coming to you from Toronto, Ontario. I'm celebrating this year 20 years living with multiple sclerosis in remission, and I'm really thankful to MS&Me Radio and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network for the opportunity to host this radio show. So this year, because I'm celebrating 20 years in remission, I launched something called Chronically Well Club, and if you've been following my episodes, I hope that you have been enjoying them so far and that you've been learning from them, because my mission is really to educate the MS community specifically about the many different things that are within your power to control completely. So I really want to help you to discover your body's innate power to heal and recreate your life on your own terms. As part of this exploration, I've spent the last 20 years exploring many different therapies, diets, many different things to try and figure out what works and what doesn't. And a lot of people ask me, how did you do it? How are you staying in remission? And in answer to that question, I've created something called the 9 Keys of Healing. So you'll hear me talk about these throughout this episode, and in many different episodes. They're intertwined, they work together, but they're 9 different things that are completely within our control to maximize our own wellness. So those 9 keys of healing are your diet, toxins, movement, emotions, environment, community, cognition, gut, and mindset. So today is actually an interview. I'm going to be speaking in a few minutes with Dr. Maren Tabrizi, who is a chiropractor using a lot of principles of neuroscience. So we're definitely going to be talking about movement. There might be some emotion in there. We'll be talking about cognition and mindset, definitely, because a lot of what he does is focused on the mind and the brain and how it communicates with the body. So before I get started talking with Dr. Tabrizi, I'd like to talk a little bit about my previous experiences working with different therapists that I guess used to be called alternative therapy therapists, but are becoming a lot more mainstream. So over the past 20 years, I've worked with massage therapists, physiotherapists, Reiki practitioners, craniosacral therapists, and finally, most recently, chiropractors. And I've looked at many different ways of really learning how to understand my body. So some of you know that back in 1997, when I first became ill with MS, I was temporarily paralyzed on the right side of my body. And as I relearned how to walk and move and brush my hair and eat and all those things, I learned a lot about how my brain communicates with my body. And this was when I was just 17 years old. So even then, 20 years ago, I knew intuitively that there's a connection between how the brain functions and how the body moves, and your own awareness of your body and of your bodily processes is very important for healing. I've always known this. And over the years, as I've worked with massage therapists and physiotherapists, I've experienced some temporary relief, but I never really experienced the kind of aha moments that I was looking for. With massage, it feels amazing, but the results tend to be temporary. With physio, I worked with a physiotherapist who was also a personal trainer and, made some really great progress. I became really fit, but the certain patterns that were ingrained from my paralysis recovery never seemed to improve. I would overall get stronger, but the same patterns would keep repeating themselves. So someone suggested a couple years ago that I try a chiropractor, and I tried two different ones in Toronto. And again, I had some temporary relief, and I was a little disappointed though to find out that all they did was, the sort of manipulation of the spine, the cracking, the stereotypical stuff that chiropractors do, and, a little bit of muscular and tension release. But there was no conversation. It was one of these things where you would show up, you'd be in there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. They would do their thing and you would go home. And there was no communication about, homework. Maybe it's because I was a teacher by trade, but I wanted homework. I wanted to know what I could do between the sessions to learn and grow and continue to work with my body. But I was always told, no, don't do anything on your own. Just come back here and I will treat you. So it was a very passive kind of treatment process that I went with it because I didn't really have another option at that time, but it didn't really satisfy my need to learn about my own body and grow personally in terms of my understanding of how my body moved and how I could learn how to move better. So fast forward to spring of 2017, and I was at my naturopath's office, a place called the Integrative Health Institute in Toronto, and I saw a little postcard for this guy called Dr. Marin Tabrizi. And what grabbed my attention is not just that he's a chiropractor, but it said neuroscience-based chiropractor. And I thought, that sounds like something that I would be interested in checking out. So I've now been working with Dr. Tabrizi for most of 2017, and I've learned an incredible amount about the functioning of my body and about how I control my body through my brain, through my cognition, and through the principles of neuroplasticity. So I'm going to talk throughout this interview about some of the aha moments that I've had and some of the things I've particularly learned, but I want to first introduce Marin and give him a chance to tell us about some of his background. So hi, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. That was a quite an intro.
So Dr. Tabrizi, can you tell our listeners what your training is?
So I started in psychology, and then I moved into chiropractic, and then I finished off studying some osteopathy. And I guess I was always fascinated in terms of what was the active ingredients when it comes to any modalities. I think that a lot of times people get confused by the names, by the different techniques. And I wanted to be able to figure out, well, why would somebody with, let's say, low back pain would respond differently to acupuncture, they would respond differently to homeopathy or any other modalities, right? And to me, that was always very challenging and confusing. So then around 10 years ago, there was this massive explosion of knowledge when it comes to understanding of how the brain works, not only from a structural standpoint, but also from the functional standpoint, which is really interesting. So then it all started to make sense to me that in terms of, well, what we're really doing to the patients is not necessarily what we thought or what we learned in school. The best way I can sort of describe it is that anytime you use any form of therapy, you create a neurological opportunity. Now, your nervous system is primed to be able to do things differently, and hopefully we are doing something positive that has reduced your pain or has given an opportunity, a capacity to be able to do things a little bit better. Now, what you do after that becomes the key thing. So again, we created a neurological window. Now I want to be able to, again, to reinforce those patterns. And to me, that is the key ingredients when it comes to any sustainable therapy. Now, the challenge is, like most patients, they just want to feel better. They really don't want to sort of get better. And I understand that life is very busy. We all have to do way more than what we're supposed to do, right? Mm-hmm. But still, if you're going to do something right, I really think that it matters to be able to educate the patients in the right way, to be able to communicate, to be able to deconstruct it where they feel strong enough about themselves, and also be able to give them, and I love this term, a license to win, because sometimes, we either make the exercises too difficult or we make things way too complicated that most people they're not quite sure how to do it properly. And then the default is, well, I'm not going to do anything, right? And to me, that was always the key thing is that how do I be able to simplify this complex ideas And since we work together, I always put a disclaimer, this is the limitation of my understanding. At this point, if I learn something new, I'm not very dogma driven. I'm like, okay, there's a better way to do it. This is what I think is the mechanism. To me, that's the key thing, is like understanding what we're doing from a physiological, from a neurological standpoint, and really look at it in terms of how long is it going to be sustainable? How long is it going to stay with the patient?
Amazing. Yeah, one of the things that I really liked from the beginning when we started working together is that we were talking, we were communicating, right? This wasn't a passive experience where it was just, lie down on the table and I'm going to manipulate something in your back and then you're going to go home. It was an ongoing dialogue where you were asking me questions, you were having me demonstrate things, and there was nothing I was doing that I didn't understand. I was very clear why I was doing each thing and what the purpose was and what we were moving towards. And I think that dialogue is something that's really important for patients to advocate for with their practitioners. You should always understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and to what end, right? So you told me you've developed something called the bespoke therapy. So what is this?
Well, I think one thing was I like to refer to myself as a neuroscience-based therapeutic educator, because I think the role of a doctor is try to be able to educate the patients. And I think that it's not only education, but also be able to allow them to apply that education. Because, I mean, you can find anything you want, on the web these days, right? But the question is, like, we still are struggling with how do you be able to, again, develop a good habits and then develop good procedures in our lives, right? So the key thing that I like to be able to do, and again, bespoke, I like it. It's more sort of a way of like describing personalized medicine to me, to be able to see that, okay, what is resonating with the patients? Because we also are at the age where everybody wants to talk about research, and I respect research tremendously. I try to be as evidence-based as I can be. However, it always comes back to what works for that patient. And I think a lot of times my goal clinically is try to be able to get somebody better, not to get them to have a perfectly aligned spine or a perfectly aligned muscle firing or anything else. Is try to be able to see what works for the patients, and also be able to change the stories that they have about themselves, and then to be able to give them a little bit more control. Because to me, I think, one of the things that I learned is that people talk about stress as being detrimental to somebody's health, which I totally agree. But it's a different kind of stress. It's the stress that you have no control. That's what really drives us bonkers. That's what really depletes our energies. It's like, if you feel like, okay, I'm stressed, but I'm doing a job that is meaningful to me, or I'm trying to do something positive, or as you wonderfully pointed out, that you're within a social support system that really reinforces your core values, then you'd be okay. But if you're stuck in a situation that you feel like, oh my God, I don't like my job, but I can't leave my job because I have responsibilities and everything else, that lack of control is what really constrains us. And I do think that, these are the diseases of being captive, you know what I mean?
Right.
Where we're in the environment that our bodies, our brain can't really be able to, again, to express itself.
That's interesting you talked about lack of control, because I've said in several episodes, we've been talking about emotions and the idea that what causes stress really is uncertainty, loss of control, and lack of information. Those are the three things, right? And I love that with the training that we're doing, I have the information, right? Because you're explaining it to me. I may not be able to control all the things in my life, but in those moments, I understand, this basic idea that neurons in our brain, neurons that fire together, wire together. So a lot of the exercises and things that we're doing are incredibly simple. I'm joking with my friends when I get home, like, oh, what did you do at Chiro today? Oh, it's like I turned my thumb 2 degrees to the left and then opened my jaw and then everything was better. But they really are these very, very simplistic movements that are carefully controlled. And because we're doing them repetitively, that's what's helping us to develop a new pattern. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so I think I'm very cognocentric. I really think like reason and rationality are as important. When I was in undergrad, I was reading Plato, and I imagine having conversations with Nietzsche and pontificating about stuff. But I mean, the more you start understanding how the brain works, you realize like, wow, the ultimate expression of like, our brain and our physiology is actually movement, the complexity that goes into the system, right? In terms of how much it constantly analyzes itself, right? So I think I'm more impressed by that. And again, just look at, how much the Defense Department spends on robots, right? Trillions of dollars has been spent, and they can't really be able to do some of the basic things that, we do. Now, the other point is that if you want to be able to make some changes, the easiest way, or I think the most direct way that you can have access to your brain is vis-a-vis your body and your movement patterns. Mm-hmm. I think to me that becomes the key thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of meditation, but meditation is very hard. It just takes a massive amount of time, right? Being able to control our emotions is challenging, but if you be able to, again, to clean up our movements, and again, there isn't like, a correct way to move, but as long as, the term that I like to be able to promote is that optionality. If your brain feels it has optionality, then it feels safe. If your movement patterns reduce, then it causes a massive amount of constraint on the system. You see what I mean? And then you can sort of like, think of this as like when you're stuck in a traffic and you can't go anywhere and it drives you mad.
Right.
But if you can somehow like, be able to, again, to exit maybe a little bit like, earlier or after, and then have other sort of like, options, then it's not going to be as challenging. So this idea of being stuck and just having no way out or one or two ways, it does affect the system tremendously.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot of new ways of moving, and a couple of things that I wanted to share were some of my aha moments, that are very specific to things that are common with the MS community. So one of the things that I learned from you, which is something that I think about on a daily basis now, is this idea that, especially for someone like me, where I had paralysis on one side of my body, but not on the other, the big thing for me is about symmetry and recognizing a difference between the two sides of my body and the way that I stride, my gait pattern and how it's imbalanced. This has become like an obsession over the past 20 years, right? Most people wouldn't tell by looking at me that there's a difference, but I can constantly perceive it. And one of the things that I learned by working with a practitioner like Dr. Moran and having an outside set of eyes that could look at my gait patterns and examine my musculature, he was able to point out things to me that I didn't realize were happening. For example, I had actually tried to overcompensate. So essentially, because my right side was weak when I first regained movement after the paralysis, I really focused so much of my mental energy on trying to control, like really trying to control the right side of my body in order to try and get it to do what the left side of my body is doing. But as a result of that, having too much focus on that side, I now have overdevelopment of the muscles on the right side of my body and underdevelopment of the good side. And so what I learned from Dr. Moran is to really focus on what's working, right? Instead of focusing on what's not working and trying to fix it through cognitive and mental effort, instead focus on what is working. So I really shifted my focus when I'm cycling, when I'm walking, anytime I'm moving, to pay attention to the left side, the good side, the side that has a smooth pattern. And it's this wonderful moment every time I can remember and go, yes, stop, be mindful, ignore the right side, just pay attention and celebrate what the left side is doing. And then it's like every now and then I can sort of check in with the right side and I notice, hey, it's learning by my focus, and it will just automatically do what the left side is doing because I'm focusing on that side, right? So are there any other ways that people with MS might be able to use that idea in their own day-to-day lives?
So I got to give a shout out to Gary Gray, and he was really interesting in terms of, you want to think about your movement based on the ground reaction force and based on how you move through a gravitational field. So let me sort of like, describe it a little bit easier. So your bones move, your joints feel, your muscles react, and your brain allows.
Okay.
Okay. So I can sort of say that again, but
Yeah.
this is important, right? So what I mean by joints feeling is like, we have these mechanoreceptors, we get all this input that comes into the system, and it gets through your cord and through your cerebellum and through your brain, and it gives a feedback. So in terms of where things needs to be, right? Your muscles react to the amount of force. So every time you take a step, 2 to 4 times your body weight goes through your system. So they need to be able to stiffen up to be able to handle that. Because if you think about concussion, what it is a vibration and rotational stress to the brain, and your brain doesn't like that. So every time you're walking, and one of the things that we discussed was you tend to be overstrider. You tend to swing your legs, right? And there's more forces that is going through your knee and your joints, right? So being able to handle the stuff that people are doing throughout the day, I think, is the key thing. Now, the most crucial aspect is that your brain allows, because it constantly goes back through the history, and it basically assesses, have you done this in the past? Was it successful or not? So to me, this is a really amazing thing. And then there's some fascinating research in terms of that before you do any simple move, like let's say I try to touch my nose with my left hand, my brain runs a simulation of this movement 17 times before it lets me do it. That is incredible. People should be blown away by that.
I am blown away by that.
This is how much stuff that, that is going on, right? So for us to be able to, I think balance training is the key thing. And these are the stuff, again, at this time of Instagram, I know it's not the sexy, cool stuff. People like to have complicated sort of a therapies, but then being able to practice the basic stuff, I think, becomes the key thing. Being able to, again, create a better connection between the foot, to the core, to the rest of the system. Being able to orient ourselves throughout the day, based in terms of why am I here? One of the key things that I always ask patients, I'm like, why are you standing the way you are? Why are you sitting the way you are? Is it because it's familiar, or is it because it actually feels good? And most of the times people takes them a little time to be able to figure out which is which. To me, it is amazing that our brain is a habit forming machine. It likes to automate things, right? So it's difficult, and contrary to what people like to say, it doesn't like change, but it likes to be able to, like you said, it likes to have certainty, it likes to be able to have that predictability. And as we know, the world is becoming more wonderfully complicated, and the speed of change is becoming exponentially rapid. So the question is like, well, how to be able to, again, to center ourselves, right? And I think to me, ultimately, when you look at any form of mindfulness, meditation, I like to call it brainfulness. If you be able to integrate those aspects with some of the movement patterns in terms of, hey, what's going on with my right leg to the left leg, and then being able to truly assess it,
right,
not just based in terms of how it perceives to you, because we actually have these centers in our brain that gives us this false sense of what we perceive about ourselves.
And I love what you mentioned a little bit earlier about what are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis, right? Because I remember when we first started working together, I told you about how I had been doing beginner ballet lessons for 3 years because I thought it was the best thing to focus on my balance and strength. And then you very bluntly asked me, when was the last time you walked down the street and did a pirouette? Do you ever actually stand in first position, with your leg? And I thought, well, no. I don't ever do that. So why am I spending so much time training myself to perform a motion that never actually gets repeated throughout my day-to-day activities? And then you asked me, well, what do you really want to do? And this is what I think is going to be beneficial for people in the MS community. I said, I just want to walk up a flight of stairs without holding the banister. Right? I want to have that kind of stability and balance and strength and function that I can just feel that flow that I used to have before the paralysis, where I didn't have to think about each individual movement. And so, like you said, we went way back to basics. There was a little ledge in the office, I remember, and it was just paying attention to perfecting that movement of stepping up, paying attention to my core, my balance, where my gaze was focused, right? Like that was something I wasn't aware of, that where I was looking was really affecting my movement. And then just repeatedly that step up and step down and step up and step down and feeling that fluidity. And then you're using that neuroplastic process to create a pattern. And, doing that little step up and step down with the kind of focus that you taught me to have was way more beneficial for me than years of doing pirouettes in first position, even though I thought it was helping with my balance. So,
I think Diane Lee, she calls it like meaningful task. I like that. You ask patients like, well, what do you want to do? What is meaningful to you? And I think a lot of times, a lot of practitioners, we don't pay attention to that. I mean, what is that extra 10 degrees range of motion in your hip means to the patient? Nothing. But being able to sort of see what scares them, what sort of like, gives them confidence, what gives them like, what a sense of like, control over lives. To me, that becomes a key thing. And I think a lot of times, like, there is that misplaced precision. That was that I think that we talked about is like, look, stop focus on 5,000 different things, right? Focus in terms of your gaze, because we know that your vestibular system, your visual system, those are the key drivers. Where your eyes look is going to affect like, the firing in your paraspinal muscles, your extensor chains, so those are the key things that we want to be able to do. And it's very difficult, to be able to reinforce those patterns, right? But to me, the key thing is that repeated exposure and then being able to go from there. And what I love about it, and again, I put you in that 1% club, right? That you really get it and you realize like maintaining your health or trying to improve your health, it takes a lot of time and effort. It's not easy, but you have your good days, you have your bad days, right? And I'm acutely aware that, I'm also dealing with people who just feel like, oh, if I just do 3 minutes of high intensity training, I don't have to exercise for a week, right?
It's more of an ongoing lifestyle thing.
It's like a lot of nonsense. And I think to me, the biggest thing is that being able to realize like, look, don't just think about the movements and those exercises from a fitness perspective. And I feel like, being able to do a movement that reorganizes your brain, and then your brain has the maps of your body. And I think like one of the reasons that, people feel better with the massage is not what they think they're doing to the tissue, to the muscles. You're actually remapping those areas in the brain. The same thing with a joint. When I mobilize a joint, if I try to be able to reorient something, it's just remapping, and then it gets that cortical refreshment that goes into the system. So again, it just allows the system to be able to, again, recalibrate itself, right? So to me, that becomes the key thing that, we want to be able to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Tabrizi. If our listeners want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, I'm on the Instagram, Dr. T_Toronto. So I put some good stuff out there, and I promise everybody I'm not going to put any photos of any food. I mean, it utterly, like, what annoys me when people do that is like, who cares? And then I am at Integrative Health Institute. We are at King at Sherbourne, downtown Toronto.
So here in Toronto. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please do follow along. You can find me on my main website, www.chronicallywell.club, and there are links on that page to all of my different social media outlets and lots of services and tools that I have available for the MS community. So thank you very much for listening today. Please go out and create for yourselves an amazing day and be well.